The War of 1971 did not begin with bombs. It began with a refusal. This was not a sudden war, and it was not an inevitable fate. It was the result of a single political decision, a choice to hold on to power, even if it meant tearing a country apart. And once that decision was made, war between India and Pakistan was only a matter of time. In 1970, Pakistan held its first general election. For the first time, the people were allowed to choose their leaders. And when the results came in, they did more than decide a winner. They revealed how fragile the idea of unity really was. In East Pakistan, the Awami League, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, won an overwhelming majority. In fact, they won enough seats to form the government of all of Pakistan, which meant that, constitutionally, the outcome was already clear. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman should have become Prime Minister. But this is where the process began to stall. Because power did not sit in East Pakistan. It sat in West Pakistan, with the military leadership and the political elite. And from there, resistance followed. President Yahya Khan delayed the transfer of power. At the same time, political leader Zulfikar Ali Bhutto openly opposed Mujib forming the government. What followed was not an immediate break, but a slow, dangerous pause. Negotiations dragged on. Promises were made, deadlines were quietly missed. And with every delay, trust began to collapse. In East Pakistan, the feeling was betrayal. A growing belief that their democratic voice no longer mattered. In West Pakistan, the fear was different, that control itself was slipping away. For a brief moment, reconciliation was still possible. But that moment did not last, because as compromise failed, ego took its place. And once that happened, the country was already moving toward a point of no return. By March 1971, Pakistan's military leadership had reached a decision. Instead of transferring power and instead of continuing negotiations, they chose a different path. They chose force. The operation that followed was called Operation Searchlight. Its objective was direct: to crush political opposition in East Pakistan and retain control at any cost. But what was meant to restore order did the opposite. As the operation began, cities were locked down, universities were surrounded, and civilians were caught in the middle. From that point on, violence spread faster than control ever could. What followed during the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War was not random chaos, but a systematic campaign of terror. Pakistani military units, along with local paramilitary collaborators, moved deliberately against the population itself. Entire communities were targeted. Civilians were killed in large numbers. Students, teachers, doctors, journalists, and engineers were singled out. Members of the police and the East Pakistan Rifles were hunted down. In many places, the killings were concentrated and intentional. Villages were wiped out in single operations. Mass graves would later be discovered across the country. Silent proof of the scale of what had occurred. Women bore a devastating share of the violence. Sexual violence was used systematically, not as isolated acts, but as a weapon to terrorize families, destroy social bonds, and permanently scar communities. Homes were burned. Entire neighborhoods were erased. Property, records, and places of worship were destroyed. Religious minorities, especially Hindus, were specifically targeted. Many were marked, hunted, and driven out. By the end of the violence, millions had fled across the border into India, the majority of them Hindu civilians. The result was one of the largest humanitarian catastrophes of the 20th century. By the time the guns fell silent, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, were dead, and an entire population had been displaced. For genocide scholars, the pattern was unmistakable. What unfolded in East Pakistan was not merely a military crackdown, it was a planned genocide. And yet, despite the evidence, despite survivor testimonies, despite the graves left behind, the world would take decades to even begin calling it by its name. By mid-1971, the crisis had crossed borders. What began as political denial had become a human catastrophe. Nearly 10 million people fled into India. For India, this was no longer distant. It was a humanitarian disaster and a security threat. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi tried diplomacy. The world listened, but nothing changed. When Pakistan launched airstrikes in December 1971, war became unavoidable. One of the key flashpoints of the 1971 conflict was the Battle of Chumb. Fought between December 3rd and 11th in the Jammu and Kashmir sector, Pakistan's 23rd Division captured the strategically vital town of Chumb from India's 10th Infantry Division. The engagement on the Western Front significantly escalated tensions, becoming a critical factor that pushed India and Pakistan into full-scale war. Under Eastern Command, led by Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, the Indian Army moved fast. Supported by the Air Force, the Navy, and the Mukti Bahini, Indian forces isolated Dhaka and collapsed resistance. The cost was heavy. Around 3,800 Indian soldiers were killed and nearly 10,000 wounded. But the war lasted just 13 days. On December 16, 1971, in Dhaka, over 90,000 Pakistani soldiers surrendered, the largest military surrender since World War II. With one signature, the war ended. East Pakistan disappeared, and Bangladesh was born. Not just through war, but through the refusal to let democracy be silenced by violence. History often remembers wars by their battles, but wars are rarely decided on the battlefield alone. Sometimes, they are decided months earlier, in closed rooms by leaders who believe power matters more than people. The War of 1971 did not begin with explosions. It began the moment a democratic result was refused. By the time the fighting started, it was already too late.